Hey, welcome to my channel again, or for the first time, whichever it is for you. Today I'm going to be talking about a book that's not fiction and it's not YA. It's actually an autobiography written by J.D. Vance. It's called HillBilly Elegy. This is it. So this review is going to be quite brief. I'm not going to be talking about it too much because, quite frankly, this book is quite thin. And it's based on a person's life. There's not too much to analyze, not too much to criticize. The reason why I actually picked this one up is because I guess I was trying to kind of understand what's going on in Trump's America. The thing that a lot of people were talking about is the fact that Trump was elected by a majority of the working class, the white working class, who were feeling as if their jobs and their security and everything else was being threatened by immigrants, people of color, women to a degree, to a certain extent. And there's definitely this feeling in the United States, maybe not so much anymore, but when Trump was running for presidency, that the American working class, the white working class to be more specific, dominated by men, is somehow this force that's been neglected and forgotten and pushed to the margins for such a long time, and finally they're being sort of, rising from the ashes, recognized again, because they obviously have been sort of obliterated or pushed to the sidelines during Obama's presidency. I don't necessarily think that that's the correct thing, but I'm not super big into politics, so it's not as if I really know what's been going on in the US, especially since I don't live there. So I was really curious to see what a person from the white working class background will have to say about the US, and sort of how people feel, and sort of how it got to the point where we have a reality TV show star as a president to one of what is known as the most powerful countries in the world, which is a little bit insane, especially in light of, the previous presidents that have been sort of, running the country, whatever you might want to call it. So J.D. Vance decided to write a memoir, although he's like 32 or something. And to be honest, his life is not super duper interesting. Like, honestly, it's not. He grew up in a very poor background. Well, not like, exceedingly poor. Not like, developing country poor. But definitely impoverished background of, an absent father. The partners, his mom's partners, kind of came and went. I think his mom was married like 5 times or something. She also had to deal with a substance abuse. And there was definitely violence, like domestic violence in his family. His aunts have definitely been victims of domestic violence. His grandma has been sort of a victim to that in a way. Her husband turned into an alcoholic, although he did sort of decide to sober up at some point, and that was quite fine. But I think that the point is not just Vance's kind of like background that's important in this narrative. It's kind of like to demonstrate how there's a certain portion, and it's not that small, of the US population who belongs to that specific class. So, especially men, because it seems as if men kind of have more power, like at least theoretically, or maybe even in real life, men tend to hold more power. So, you can sort of see how if a man grows up in a poor environment, maybe, emotionally deprived or intellectually deprived environment, they will grow up to be not really amazing people who will have kids, and they will bring up their kids basically the same way that they were brought up. And J.D. Vance kind of explored that, and he was talking about how he was lucky enough to, although his mom was sort of very dysfunctional as a person, he was lucky enough to have an abundance of other relatives who were willing to take care of him when his mom was not there for him, when his dad failed him, when his other dads kind of failed him, and he didn't really blame these dads because they weren't really his dads, they were just boyfriends who came and went, like I mentioned earlier. But he sort of emphasized the importance of having that security net that is so needed, especially for young people, especially for young men, because it seems as if young men are more susceptible to kind of like being brainwashed, I think, because they seem to fall faster into despair than women for some reason, because I think that it has to do a lot with the way that men were brought up for generations to kind of feel as if, especially white men, to feel as if they are in control and they have all this power and, you know, they basically don't have to work too hard or fight too hard to get what they want because essentially it's a given from day one. However, the world climate is not the same anymore because we do have mass migrations. We do have a lot of people of color who hold powerful positions, and J.D. Vance is by no means sort of, you know, kind of mocks the working class, nor is he stating that immigration is bad. He never says anything like that. What he does say is that, you know, you sort of have to look at your own backyard and see what you are doing wrong as a person, instead of kind of pointing, like, you know, a finger at the Chinese and saying, oh, they're taking away our jobs and all the jobs are going overseas. So this is not to say that the jobs are not going overseas. So a lot of jobs have gone overseas, and definitely a lot of people have suffered from it. But he's not sort of just talks about the financial problems and economic problems that have arisen as a result of globalization and whatever. He's also talking about a certain like moral bankruptcy and how parents neglect their kids, especially in his community. And I think that what I really liked about his story is that he sort of managed to find the strength to kind of rise above that. So he ended up enlisting to the Marines. He served for 4 years. He went to Iraq. And then he came back. He went to Ohio State. Afterwards, he applied and he got into Yale School of Law, which was really, really impressive considering his background, considering the fact that a lot of his friends sort of just you know, kind of live on welfare and they don't even want to work. It's not as if like they don't even want to be bothered with trying to get a job. So he basically just kind of motivates people to sort of, you know, work on yourself before you kind of like turn and, you know, start a witch hunt. Maybe ask yourself what you are doing wrong. And this is what I really, really loved about this book. And honestly, it kind of made me cry towards the end when I was just inspired by how hard he was working to sort of get to where he is. And he also emphasized how important it is to have a family that's gonna support you, because he was talking about social class differences and how in his life he was used to a lot of yelling and shouting and screaming and fighting, and it was the norm. Like, if his mom was not fighting with one of the boyfriends, it meant that something was wrong. But his wife, her parents never raised their voices at each other. They were always very, you know, civil with one another. And it kind of made me think about my family and the people that I know. And it sort of made me think about, you know, the things that I've witnessed and how people were dealing with crises. And to be honest, I thought to myself, well, I definitely know when I will have kids at some point, I definitely probably will think twice. Or just, you know, when you're with a partner, it kind of makes you think twice about, you know, if you do want to raise your voice and kind of shout at them, and how it reflects and what it says about you as a person when you start screaming and yelling to kind of solve a problem and when you become frustrated. So that was really, in that sense, it's a bit like reading a psychological book, like a book about psychology and human behavior. So this will be the end of my review. Like I said, it's 257 pages long, so it's a very short book. At times it gets a little bit daunting and a little bit boring because not a lot happens. I mean, this guy's like 32 or something, so it's not as if he had done that many amazing things in his life. I mean, not yet, maybe in the future, but I definitely do have respect for him now that I have realized how much he was pushing himself. And it's definitely like a great motivational little book. So if you kind of look for a gift to give someone who's trying to understand sort of what's going on in the American psyche when it comes to the working class, definitely pick this one up. This is not like a social study, this is not like a social science book or anything like that, so it's not as if you can bring it to class and say, well, this book says, this is based on personal experience, and Vance does stress that while a lot of the people in his background are like on welfare and are drug addicts and have like all these men and that come in and out of their lives, there are people who you know, are very decent, and although they don't have a lot of money, they do work hard to maintain what they have, and there are a lot of loving, supporting people in that community. However, they are not the majority, and I think he's fighting for, you know, for that to be the majority. He's like, you don't have to have a lot of money to be happy, and you don't have to have a lot of money to be a decent person. And I think maybe if more people listen to that message, then maybe Trump would not be president. I mean, that's just my take on this whole thing. So definitely read this. This is a powerful little book. I can totally understand why it became a bestseller. I'm gonna give it, okay, I lied. I will give it rating like 4 out of 5. Not 5 out of 5, probably because it wasn't that gripping. I wish it was a little bit more interesting, a little bit more intense. But it was, but it wasn't. But it did get emotional towards the end. Definitely read it if you're trying to, like, if you're into cultural studies, if you want to, you know, branch out from fiction or whatever, definitely go for it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful day, whatever it is you live on this planet. You know, try and read this book. I mean, it will explain a lot of things, I believe. Yeah, peace out.